so now we're going to talk about equalizing workload. So there's lots of different strategies. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is the importance of training students to be in a group. We make the assumption that they know how to do this, and you folks know how to do this because you're professionals, you've been in groups, so I didn't need to give you a training before we started out today, but our students here, and really in most other colleges too, they need a little bit of training. They need to know that there's roles in groups. So here's my 5R approach. I think that what we want to start off with is establishing rapport. So the first thing is you got to get to know your group members. So you need to give them a little time for that social part of the group. Who you are, what's a little bit about yourself. That's an important element because if you know people in your group, it's just going to make it function more effectively. Then the second R is the rules. We need to set up rules, and this is where most of the groups go bad, And not just a rule where you need to do what you're supposed to do, but what happens if you can't? Because life happens sometimes. What's the process going to be in this rule? So if everyone's supposed to bring, this article to the group, and I don't bring it, what does that mean? So are there any consequences? You want to kind of build that in to the system so people know very clearly what the group expectations are. So what are all the rules in this group? If you can't make it to a meeting, what's the protocol? Do you have to email ahead of time? Do you have to make sure you've uploaded your material into Campus Cruiser? What do you have to do? And then what are the roles? So what roles are you all going to play? And this is something that you could do. You could assign different roles to groups, and I'm just going to skip over here 1 second. Here are some roles that might work depending on what you're doing. I use this for a presentation, that they're working on together. But you can come up with the different roles, and you could either assign them roles. They could rotate so they get different opportunities to practice being in different types of leadership roles. The one role that I would say that I think is a really powerful one is the questioner role. Because remember what I told you before about groupthink? We don't like to challenge other people, but if it's your job to challenge them, that feels a little more comfortable. My goal is I'm supposed to ask you, is there another explanation for that? Could there be another way of looking at it? How do we know that's true? So my role is to ask those questions of the group. And then all of a sudden they're starting to look at those kinds of questions. So what you would need to do is figure out what the roles are. Now you could do that for your group. The groups could come up themselves with it, but I think it's kind of powerful for you to figure out what roles work best for your class, and then they could tweak and modify them. But then it's clear who's doing what, because that's one of the problems. So if we go back to the 5R again, so once they have the rapport, the rules, the roles, the next thing is they got to get ready to work. Group work is work. They need to know it takes time. Learning doesn't happen like this. Learning takes time, so we need to make sure that they're ready to work. They have prepared and done everything they need to do. And of course, we have to have them evaluate. So they have to remember to check in. How are we doing as a group? This is our deadline over here. We kind of said that we were going to have this much done by this date. We need to check in. Is this all working? Is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are we progressing at the pace that we need to progress at? And you could ask for progress reports from your group. You can force some of this remembering to evaluate by assigning it. You ask them to do some kind of assignment. How is the group coming along? What do you need to do to make it function more effectively? What are you going to need to do to make sure that this project is done on time? And you can do content checks, process checks, whatever it is that you want to do. But the research is clear that if you train students, they will do better in the group. So you will have less nightmares by spending a little bit of front-end time talking about the roles and the rules and all that other stuff. Okay. The other issue for increasing the accountability, and this is really, really important, this is a big one, is have them do something individually before it's time for them to engage in a group. So I teach psychology classes, and a lot of my classes, I have a paper and a presentation, amongst other things like quizzes, exams, and other kinds of assignments. But the two kind of meaty things are this paper and presentation. And for the longest time, I had them on different topics. They were just kind of separate entities. And then I said, well, why am I doing that? If I make them do the paper before the presentation on the presentation topic, now they have to go to the group with something. So now you can link your assignments to help prepare them for the activities. So in the beginning of class, I give out the options of assignments. Now the only part that's a little restrictive is I do have to restrict them to the 5 topics or whatever that I have if I have 5 groups. So you can't do any topic for your paper. So you have to end up picking one that enough of the class members are interested in. And then I'll have them do the paper, and they're not even a part of a group yet. They don't know who their group members are yet. They just know what their paper topic is. Now, the first time they're getting together, they've got an entire research paper on this topic. Think about how different that first conversation is going to be versus like, hey, our topic is, what are we going to do? Anybody know anything about this? How are we going to start? So by giving them individual work ahead of time, it doesn't always have to be a big giant paper, but whatever it is, giving them individual work ahead of time, again, you're holding them accountable because you are grading them on that, probably. I do. And you're also increasing the interdependence. They need each other to achieve this, so they might need more than what their paper did. So now they need each other to fill in those other gaps and to identify other resources. So, maybe Margaret had a resource that I didn't have, and I got to go pull that one from her. And so we got to pull it all together for this group project. So you can't throw folks into group without background knowledge and without information. So you don't just start, again, you can for a syllabus exercise, you can for lower level content, but if you're talking about a bigger project, you need to make sure you've taught it first, and they have the background that they need in order to get the information that they need. So building that prior knowledge and giving them individual assignments really does increase that accountability. Now, I'm going to skip this because we're running a little bit low on time and I want to get to some of the other things. I was going to do this other activity. I have an article for you here that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to let you walk away with it. I was going to do an activity with it, but I just don't think we have enough time for it. So I want to tell you about the activity because you could use the group activity in your class. So basically, you identify any kind of reading. I identified a reading on group work for you. Very handy dandy, right? Right on point. So you give them some kind of material to work from. And what this save the last word for me exercise would be, so this is how it would work. You would all look at this, and I'd ask you to identify a quote or something from the article that kind of, just spoke to you, that was meaningful to you in some way. And then I'd, tell you on an index card to write down that quote, and on the back of it, write down why. What did it mean to you? What did it make you think about? Why did this kind of strike a chord for you? And then what happens is everybody has their quote, and you would start, and Johanna here would hold her quote up to everybody, and everyone else would have to respond to the quote, and Joanna's not allowed to talk. So she holds her quote up, and everyone else has to respond and say, well, what does that mean to them? What do they think about when they see that quote? All of that. So they're kind of responding to what Joanna thought was important. After they're all done responding, then Joanna gets to talk about why she picked that quote. And then you rotate along. Now think about what this does. It gets them engaged in some kind of material related to your class, and it also engages them in listening skills because they have to listen to everyone else before they get to talk, and everyone gets to participate. So everyone has a voice, so you kind of go around the table. Questions about the process? I was hoping we were going to get to experience it, but I think we just don't have time. Yes, Joanna?
So you give everyone the same order?
Everyone has the same material that they're working off of, but they're, most likely they're going to pull a different quote. It's very rare that they would pull the same one. You're not going to give them only a paragraph.
I know, I meant the whole class has the same order.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you assign the article ahead of time, or do you give it out in class?
You can do it either way. You can ask them to pick something out from their reading that they want to bring. It could be even something from the textbook chapter, what they thought was a really important point, or, something that they, just kind of thought was really critical or meaningful to them, or you thought of an application for it. Or it can be a small assignment that you're giving them in class that you would then have them dive into afterwards. So now that piques their interest a little bit in reading it too. So it can be kind of as a review of something that they did, or as a jumping off point for reading. Yes?
The same quote could be picked by more than one student?
Well, it could, but it's not that likely that it'll happen if you have, enough of material. Yeah.
My point is, would you like to bring those people on the same table, meantime the other students are responding on that, and let the students who pick the same quote share their ideas?
Yeah, I haven't done that. I really haven't done it that way, but you could, I guess. There's lots of different ways to, spin-offs off on this. Again, the primary idea here is to get folks engaged in the content and with each other, and to really be cognitively engaged with the content. So it's another way that you can really do it no matter what your discipline is. As long as you got content to work off of, you can really actually get them engaged a little bit in that process. So it's just another way to do group work. Okay. So Barbara Millis, she's the author of this paper actually that you're going to get from me. I was really just I was at one of the Lilly Teaching and Learning conferences, and I just happened to sit next to her at breakfast, and I had read some of her stuff because she's pretty big in the world of cooperative learning, but I had no idea I was sitting next to Barbara Millis. You know, I'm just like talking to everybody. That's what I do at these conferences. Hey, what do you do? Tell me about your, so I'm talking, and all of a sudden I found sitting next to Barbara Millis. I'm like, this is fun. So I was saying, well, let me ask you some group work questions since you're sitting next to me at breakfast as you're trying to eat your muffin. So I said to her, I struggle a little bit, and she's like, here's what I do. She says, my students don't know what they're presenting until the day they're presenting. And I said, what? She said, here's how it works. That increases accountability. How do I do that? On the day of the presentation, I will randomly assign you your part. I started to have I'll start to get a little anxious, and she says, it's the only way to really increase to make sure that they all know all the stuff. And I said, this is a really valid point, because you know what happens with group work? It's divide and conquer. I'll do this, you do that, and everyone knows this much at the end of the project. And that's not our goal, right? Our goal was for them to learn the whole thing, but have this process skill thing too. They're going to learn how to cooperate and interact with others at the same time as learning all this stuff. So I went back to my classes. I said, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to tell them the rationale, and we'll see how it goes. Well, they freaked out on me. Not surprisingly, they freaked out on me. So they were all anxious. So I said, well, we're going to do it anyway because I want you to learn the whole thing. I know you're a little anxious. We'll get through it. And I said, here's the thing about anxiety. It's temporary. Here's the thing about learning. It lasts. I said, so since our goal is about learning, and I want you to learn all of this, we're going to try it this way, and we're going to see how it goes. And they were anxious on the first day. So basically, I would take their PowerPoint, and I would make them divide it equally into, there's 5 of them. You tell me where the breaking point should be, where you think it's equally distributed, and then on the day, right before you get up, I'll be like, okay, you do this, you do that, you do this. And I'm going to tell you that they didn't love it. They still didn't love it even with my rationale. Now, I've changed it just slightly in terms of the way I package it, and it has gotten better results. They still don't love it, but they don't hate it anymore. I tell them, okay, forget about it. Pretend you're doing an individual presentation, but I'm giving you a support team. And on the day of your presentation, your support team is going to relieve you of some of your duties. So you see how cognitively I just put a little bit of a different spin on it? They're less angry about it. They're like, well, why aren't you telling me? I said, I am telling you. You're responsible for the whole thing. If your classmates don't show up, you have to do the whole presentation. You have to know it all. So, but on the day of the presentation, I'm going to relieve you of some of your duties, and someone else will step in and help you out. And that has really made a world of difference, because I have gone away, my students have gone away from that knowing this much and freaking out if someone didn't show up because, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, what do you mean, what are you going to do? You're going to do that part. I'm like, that's what you're going to do. Somebody's got to do it, and you're part of the group, so you should know it. So this increased accountability is a really powerful way to go. And this is Barbara Millis's idea. Now, you can also do this with accountability cards. She uses playing cards, but you could use index cards. So let's just say you have all these index cards. You had to put your name on each index card. Then I would come over here to this table and take all of their index cards, and I would go like this, right in front of them. And then I would go like this. Emmy, it's your turn. You're going to report out on what the group said. So now what that does is it keeps the group, everybody accountable. So when you're having a generic conversation here, I want you to talk about blah, right? When it's time to report out to the class, I'm going to pick. It's not going to be Terry who always raises his hand and said, I'll do it. No. We're going to do this randomly to get everyone involved. Tracy?
What happens when you pull out my card and I say, I don't know?
Well, that doesn't happen that often to me. I did have one student that it happened to, and I was like, really? I said, you've been together for 10 minutes. I'll give you a minute to talk to your neighbor and figure it out again. I'll come back to you. So I don't let them off the hook. And then if they push, I only had this one happen one time. And then, maybe they're just having a personal thing or something. Can't focus. They can't concentrate. move on to somebody else. I'll just say, all right, next time you owe him one. You know, he's coming in there to save you today. Next time you gotta pull through for him. And then I'll probably talk to the student outside of class because what the heck were you doing? You know, so if you had a real reason and you couldn't focus because of something personal, that's totally fine. But if you're just putting your feet up and on your phone or something, that's not fine. But again, you're monitoring the groups to try to make that not happen that often. Okay, so any questions or comments about Barbara Millis's idea about increasing accountability? If you tell them that they're going to be held accountable, telling them ahead of time, they end up performing better. So it's a good idea to tell them they're going to be held accountable, not just surprise them at the end. I mean, you don't just go and say, okay, now I'm going to get you and see if you're paying attention. No, tell them ahead of time. You want them to pay attention. So it shouldn't be a secret. Tell them. That's really kind of